What the hell happened here? Remedios asked. Don't ask, Gustav answered. Hands on her hips, Remedios scanned the cordon of royal guardsmen set up just inside the palace gate. No longer adorned in their ceremonial garb, they bristled with weaponry and their armor gleamed in the torchlight. Every paladin not on patrol was similarly present. The nobles walked, Gustav said. I didn't ask, Remedios replied. The Grand Master gave her a reproachful look. His Divine Grace proposed that new taxes be levied to restore royal power, he said. Of course, the nobles didn't like that. Duke de Bonai walked out of the court mid-session, and the nobles followed. What about the temples? The temples are calling for a return to civil discourse, but I doubt the new taxes will sit well with them as proposed. It's the people who will end up shouldering the burden, after all. For the time being, Duke de Bonai is being held in a stateroom while we wait for heads to cool off. Salazar is entreating His Divine Grace to rethink his position. I bet whoever sunk the trade fleet is laughing at us right now, Remedios said. A grimace crossed Gustav's face. This is the last thing we need, I agree, he said. But it can't be helped, considering how things played out during the court session today. How are things out in the city, by the way? The same as usual. Mostly. Baraja's sickness is flaring up again. Sickness? Gustav furrowed his brow. Ah. That. I can't imagine the nobles approving of her activities. They didn't, Remedios replied. I had to stop them from locking her up for offending their delicate sensibilities. Even after everything that's happened, that girl never learned to leave well enough alone. That isn't a headache we can deal with right now, though. What's the plan, Captain? Our duty here is to keep the peace until this latest round of politicking has settled down, Gustav told her. Things might be a bit tense with so many armsmen around the city. A show of force should be enough of a deterrent against any of the more hot-headed young scions we have running around. Aha. Well, since we're making a show of it, I suppose I'll go and pick up my sword. It was an approach that was very Gustav in nature. For as long as Remedios had known him, he favored holding things together until whatever troubles faced them blew over and the status quo was restored. Now that she was aware of what was going on, the streets of the Prime Estate seemed eerily empty as she made her way home. From the gate, the manor looked completely dark and no one greeted her upon entering. Carla? Huh, she must still be out. Ever since her family arrived in the capital, Carla had been dragged off on an endless parade of matchmaking sessions. Remedios wasn't one to talk, but her maid was several years past the point where most people got married. This was especially the case for noble women, who could end up moving in with their betrothed as early as the age of 9. As she looked around, she discovered that Carla wasn't the only one missing. The manor was silent as the other members of her household staff were busy dealing with their visiting families. Unbothered by her empty home, she made her way up to the solar and went to retrieve Safe Arlesia from its mount over the hearth. She unsheathed the legendary holy sword, inspecting its ever-honed edge. I wonder how you feel about being used as a prop, she muttered. I hope that's not an actual prop. Remedios turned to find Liam leaning against the doorframe of her bedchamber with his arms crossed. Do you know what's going on? The young thief-taker asked. Yeah, Remedios answered. Gustav mentioned that the nobles put on some theatrics today. Theatrics? Liam uncrossed his arms and slowly made his way towards her with a frown. What else did he say? Duke de Bonai is being held in the royal palace so he doesn't get up to any mischief. The Royal Guard and the Holy Order are making a show of force at the palace gate until things calm down. Liam bit his lip, shaking his head vehemently. Things aren't going to calm down, he told her. The nobles no longer recognize Caspond as their liege lord. Both the conservatives and the royalists. All right, Gustav didn't say that. He only said that the nobles walked. That means the government is broken, doesn't it? According to him, it's just posturing. Politics. Well, it's not, Liam said. Is that something you learned from House Rastello? Remedios asked. Not just House Rastello, the thief-taker answered. The nobles have evacuated their families and households from the prime estates and they're moving their armies into the city. Those armies are coming to free Duke de Bonai and tear Caspond off of the throne. This isn't posturing, this is a coup. You'd think that something didn't just destroy the trade fleet, Remedios grumbled. What are you going to do? Liam said. Uphold my oath.
Obviously, Remedios replied. I'm a paladin of the Holy Kingdom, Liam. I uphold the justice of the Holy Kingdom.
But what does that mean?
Remedios turned a bemused look at the young man. It seemed that young people in general had trouble wrapping their heads around the concept of justice. It means that I am the shield standing between the people of the Holy Kingdom and those that would bring harm upon them, she told him. I may not do a perfect job of it, but I'll be damned if I don't try.
Even if they don't care that you do? Liam asked. Hate you, even? I saw what happened between you and that nasty masked girl that you saved earlier this evening. You unconditionally put your life on the line for these people every day without fail, and they don't spare you a single decent thought. If you saw what happened back there, Remedios said, then you must have also heard what I told her. My answer to you is no different. She reached down and replaced the government-issued sword at her hip with Safe Arlesia. Liam watched her silently, looking entirely dissatisfied with her response. I still don't think you should go, he said. Someone like you is wasted on these people. That's the wrong way to look at it. I stand for these people because I must. For the good of the Holy Kingdom. And if you fall? Remedios pursed her lips at Liam's torn expression. She placed a gauntleted hand on his shoulder. Then I trust that someone will stand in my place. That's how fighting evil works, Liam. Dying doesn't mean that good loses, good letting evil have its way with the world does. The more people refuse to take a stand for righteousness, the easier it is for everyone to fall. That's exactly what happened to the Holy Kingdom, and I hope that you never forget that. She blinked as a tear fell, unbidden, down her right cheek. Somewhere deep in her heart, she knew that the Holy Kingdom was lost. In the end, Yaldabaoth and the Sorcerer King had won. No. Not on my watch. Anyway, Remedios said. I should get going before I have to wade through an army to get to the gate. For what it's worth, I hope you find your sister. You know, you're the only one who ever brings up my sister. Is that so? Well, that's pretty mean. Family's important. Remedios grinned and ruffled Liam's hair before turning to leave her solar. The streets were still empty, so she made her way unopposed to the palace gate. She looked up at the gatehouse and the nearby walls, frowning at its painful lack of security. Where's the Grand Master? She asked the officer at the gate. I believe he went to the Grand Cathedral to fetch some priests, Sister Custodio. Shouldn't they have sent some priests long ago? Remedios frowned. There must have been some confusion, the man said, or perhaps they're organizing emergency supplies. She clicked her tongue in annoyance. It felt like the world itself was being difficult. Get that gate secured and put more sentries on the wall, she told the officer. We've got trouble coming. Trouble, Sister Custodio? That was an order, Sergeant, Remedios said. Move. Did he just give me a dirty look? Remedios didn't bother pursuing the thought, staying only long enough to ensure that the sergeant started carrying out her orders before going to find Gustav. She found the Grand Master heading in the opposite direction as she entered the grounds of the Grand Cathedral. No priests? Remedios asked. Not even an acolyte, Gustav answered. The vicar says that the temple staff spend more time outside of the city than in it, tending to the encampments. You'd think the Southerners would have brought their own damn priests. Well, you know as well as I what camp life is like. It can't be helped. She sighed and fell into step beside Gustav. Camps, especially hastily raised ones like those dominating the city's surroundings, were a breeding ground for disease and parasites. Fighting their spread would be a war in itself for the temples. Our sneaky little friend says that we're facing more than just posturing, Remedios said. Yeah? Where did he hear that from? Heard and seen. The nobles are sending their men to free the Duke and depose Caspond. That can't be right. It's too radical a leap for them. Irrational, even. How many men are we talking about? About that many? Ahead of them, countless torches illuminated the palace grounds around the gate. Remedios eyed the hundreds of men entering the grounds as Gustav jogged up to the paladins maintaining the defensive line. What in the world is going on here? He demanded. Where's the Royal Guard? It should be as you see it, Captain. As for the Royal Guard, they're standing over there with their new friends. It looks like that's where our priests went, too, Remedios noted, planting her helmet on her head.
The 10 paladins who remained standing against the amassing noble forces made for a pitiful-looking defense. Gustav blew out a sigh, eyeing their opposition for a minute before stepping forward. Well, if it isn't the Grand Master bureaucrat himself. Remedios' eyes locked onto the owner of the voice. It was the same man that had confronted Nyabaraha in the northern quarter. Unlike that time, he was now fully armed and armored in obviously magical equipment. As if the situation wasn't already bad enough, Enrique Bells and several other notables were standing with him. I don't know what you're trying to pull here, Gustav said, but you are ordered to stand down, by the authority of the Holy King. We no longer recognize the authority of said Holy King, if you haven't noticed. In the interest of preserving as much of the Holy Kingdom's strength as possible against greater threats, we would ask that you order your honorable paladins to step aside. Against rebels? Gustav said, I think not. It's you gentlemen who are in the wrong here. If you've come here to make a point, then you've made it. But the court must return to reasonable discourse. There is no reasoning with madmen. But I was trying to be reasonable with you. We are here to unseat Caspond and there is effectively nothing you can do to stop us. If you must insist, however, Lord Lugo, can you deal with Montagna? With pleasure. A tall, sturdily built young man of dark hair and dusky complexion stepped out to stand across from Gustav. The Grand Master peered at the youth with a frown. I don't recall ever crossing you, Gustav said. You haven't, Lord Lugo replied. But I've heard more than enough about you over the years. Your ilk is a blight upon the Holy Kingdom and you've caused one of my friends many tears. Besides, it would be my honor to enact a measure of vengeance on her behalf. You made a woman cry? Remedios frowned at Gustav. Not that I can recall. What about you, Custodio? Remedios' gaze went from Gustav to Enrique. That should be my question, Bells, she said. Why is one of the 9 colors turning against the crown? My allegiance belonged to Queen Calca, Enrique replied. As did yours. I know you bear no love for Caspond. There is little reason for you to oppose us. Please reconsider your position, Sister Custodio, the young man beside Bells said. I and so many others here have nothing but the utmost respect for you. Your career serves as a shining example for every young scion. You show us that strength must be subservient to justice and uncompromising in its defense. It would be a grievous, wasteful loss if you were to fall defending a mad king who cares nothing for the Holy Kingdom's justice. Huh? I didn't know I had fans in the south. Then again, Carla was from the south, so it probably shouldn't have been a surprise. What's your name, kid? Remedios asked. Eduardo of House Cohen. Well, Eduardo, she said, it's nice to know you think that way, but I know what you nobles have done to the north. The way I see it, standing down would be trading a manageable evil for an unmanageable one. Evil, you say? Well, this is most unfortunate. Eduardo Cohen turned to address the thousands of men behind him. Scour the palace grounds. His voice boomed into the night sky. Secure Caspond and Duke de Bonai. What about the paladins, Lord Eduardo? Go around them. It's not as if they teleport. Unlike demi-humans, it seemed that they cared little for personal challenges. To her left, Gustav clicked his tongue. Withdraw to the palace. We see a dash. A dark flash bridged the distance between the two lines. Gustav found the point of a long sword planted squarely against his breastplate. He was blown off of his feet and sent tumbling over the grass. You are not going anywhere, Montagna, Lord Lugo said. Gustav. Remedios took 2 steps towards the Grand Master before Safar Alicia came out to redirect a glowing spear point driving in from the side. At the risk of sounding repetitive, Eduardo Cohen said. You are not going anywhere, Custodio. The lordling took several steps back, falling into a middle guard. While the familiar stance was commonly seen as a neutral one, Eduardo's grip revealed the true nature of his form. You can't seriously believe that you can beat me in a battle of endurance, Remedios said. On the contrary, Sister Custodio, Eduardo replied, I believe it's entirely possible. A solid clunk sounded from Gustav's direction, his footfalls indicating a desperate defense. To her right, another paladin was beset by 2 knights. Remedios glanced at her immediate surroundings, alert for any interlopers in her duel. If you're looking for Lord Bells, Eduardo said, he didn't have the heart to fight you. The good marine captain is leading the forces scouring the palace, instead.
Well, how kind of you to inform me,
Remedios replied.
You may still stand down at any time you wish, Sister Custodio. In response, Remedios raised her heater shield and advanced on the lordling. His spear darted in over her defense, and she raised her shield slightly to send the attack over her shoulder. Then she grimaced as his draw cut scraped against the temple of her helm. This guy might be fighting defensively, but he doesn't miss any opportunity to attack. While doing so sounded simplistic, that wasn't anywhere close to the truth. Thus far, Eduardo Cohen displayed the hallmarks of an excellent warrior, both physically and mentally. Remedios rested the flat of Safe Alicia atop her shield, picking up her pace as she searched for a gap in her opponent's defense. Eduardo backed away warily, keeping himself well outside of her measure while stealing her momentum with a zigzagging course. His weapon pounded noisily against Remedios' shield as he probed for weaknesses in return. It's a shame people like you hid themselves away during the war, Remedios said. We hardly hid, Eduardo scoffed. The Demon Emperor sent his forces south as well, if you've forgotten. We were fighting for the survival of the Holy Kingdom, the same as you. The lordling stomped his foot on the ground, launching into a sequence of rapid thrusts. His actions reversed the flow of their exchange, but, as expected, he couldn't get past her shield. Remedios calmly maintained her defense, watching his every movement. Eduardo's assault eventually petered out, and Remedios launched an attack of her own as he was recentering his form. Voidcutter. A blade of air came in the wake of her horizontal slash, opening a gash across the back of the spearman's leading gauntlet. Another air blade sliced across his thigh, and a third glanced off of his right pauldron. Remedios smirked behind her visor as Eduardo leapt back in alarm. It was a weakness of polearm users, at least ones who mostly dealt with mundane, unsophisticated realities. They were accustomed to having superior reach and, while they often had countermeasures for opponents who got within their measure, their default assumption was that creating distance meant safety. Of course, this didn't stay the case as one ascended further into realms of greater strength. A good warrior knew what the weaknesses of their chosen weapons were and they would develop ways to address them. I see you've spent some time out of the country, Remedios said. Or did House Cohen bring in a master from abroad? Either way, it looks like you're emulating a southern school, but isn't it strange to be treating me like a demi-human? Eduardo didn't deign to respond. He lowered his center of gravity, leaning forward ever so slightly. Ability boost, greater ability boost, piercing strikes. Looks like he's getting serious. Remedios raised her guard, readying Safe Alicia for a counter. His charge was so quick that he briefly vanished from Remedios' sight. Sea Lord's harpoon. She gasped as the attack punched through her shield and into her bracer, coming out the opposite side of her wrist to draw a bloody line across the steel of her placard. Then, she cried out in pain as the spearhead, which had grown wicked barbs, was torn out of her arm, taking her shield with it. Heavy recover. Remedios healed her mangled arm while Eduardo dislodged his weapon and tossed her shield into the distance. It vexes me to say so, he said, but I must thank Caspond for appointing Montagna to lead the Holy Order. I don't think that attack would have gotten through if you had been wearing the Grand Master's regalia. At the same time, it doesn't seem to have helped Montagna much. To her left, it looked like the duel between Lord Lugo and Gustave had concluded. The Grand Master lay unmoving on the ground, a square of pale cloth draped over his face. For his part, Lord Lugo looked completely unscathed and was issuing orders to the columns still making their way onto the palace grounds. Once again, Sister Custodio, Eduardo said, please stand down. By now, our forces will have reached Caspond and Duke de Bonai. You have failed to achieve your objective and Caspond's cause is a hopeless one. Do you think you can be forgiven for what you've done? Remedios spat. It is not our place to seek forgiveness, Eduardo told her. We nobles do what must be done for the good of the land and its people. The people may hate us for it if they wish, but they do not know what lies out in the world beyond. They refuse to open their eyes, content that their farms and villages will be as they always have. Still, the Demon Emperor's invasion and the existence of the Sorcerer King should be enough of a wake-up call, don't you think? These are not the same sort of existences as the Dragon Lords, who remain aloof of the affairs of mortals so long as certain esoteric boundaries remain unviolated. Roble can never be what it once was if it is to survive in the face of these new threats, no matter how fond we are of the past. Remedios gripped the hilt of Sepharlesia with both hands, brandishing its glowing blade at her opponent. "That's where you're wrong," she told him. "Your actions have been turning Roble into a soulless husk, not saving it. If you insist on tearing down the Holy Kingdom to give rise to this evil monstrosity, then you'll have to do it over my dead body." "Very well, Sister Custodio," Eduardo said. "Have it your way." She surged forward, closing the distance between them within a heartbeat. Her opponent sidestepped her trajectory, using his polearm to keep her from correcting her course. Rather than go along with his ploy, she let go of Sepharlesia with her left hand to grasp the offending spear behind its head. A strong yank brought them together and she slammed the pommel of her sword squarely onto the nobleman's nose guard. Eduardo's head snapped back, but, as with so many warriors, he refused to release his weapon. Remedios allowed the recoil from her pommel strike to bring Sepharlesia high. Strong strike. Her slash opened the young nobleman's shoulder, revealing the sight of cloven bone through his torn flesh. His enchanted armor closed over the damage as soon as she withdrew her blade. Eduardo was still stunned by her combination, so she raised Sepharlesia one last time for her finishing blow. She sent a mental command to the holy sword, and its blade flared with divine radiance. With a wordless cry, she brought her holy strike down on Eduardo's head. His sturdy helm checked the advance of the blade itself, but the wave of light it brought with it passed right through the metal, flaring through the gaps in his armor as it traveled through his body on its way to the ground. Remedios shoved her wounded opponent away with a booted foot, sending him sprawling onto the grass. Her eyes widened as he braced his spear against the ground and pushed himself to his feet with his uninjured arm. He should be dead. Yet, he was clearly not. In fact, his only sign of injury was his left arm dangling limply at his side, dripping blood. Remedios stared down at Sepharlesia, as if the legendary blade had betrayed her. How could it be? The nobles had done so much to tear down the cultural fabric of the Holy Kingdom, yet the attack meant to smite all forms of evil hadn't done any damage at all. Middle cure wounds. The telltale glow of healing magic washed over Eduardo. Remedios' cheek twitched as she sent a glare in Vicar Salazar's direction. The vicar didn't miss her look. He retreated behind the men spectating nearby with an undignified squeal. "Get back here, you filth eater!" Remedios stormed after him. Challenging shout. Remedios turned 90 degrees and chopped down on Eduardo with her sword. The nobleman was already prepared for the attack, however, deflecting it neatly to the side. "Damn it, this nonsense again." She wove her blade in wide arcs, driving the spearman back. If she couldn't get his healer, she could at least try to get him out of range. "Don't nobles have a thing about honor and duels?" she asked. "That wasn't very chivalrous." "You clearly have no understanding of chivalry if you're asking," Eduardo answered. "I won't fault you for that, however. Your position aside, you were a little more than a commoner with great personal strength, after all." A flick of her wrist found the slit of Eduardo's visor. He reacted quickly enough to avoid a fatal wound, but she still blinded his left eye. Middle cure wounds. Middle cure wounds. Seriously? Remedios deflected 3 jabs as she took an inventory of her surroundings. The spectators had followed their fight to the steps of the royal palace and the priests healing Eduardo were mixed in with them. Eduardo wouldn't allow her to go after them, so all there was to do was run them out of mana. She took in a deep breath, releasing it in a long sigh. "I hope you like pain, kid," she said. Eduardo's only response was to raise his spear, a feverish gleam in his bloody dye. "You idiot. Why did you have to be so stubborn?" Eduardo coincided as he stood over the fallen form of Remedios Custodio. Even in death, she was so beautiful that he was tempted to cup her pale cheek. In the end, their fight had emptied the mana of a dozen priests and expended 2 wands of middle cure wounds with 50 charges each. It wasn't a glamorous battle at all, certainly not one befitting one of her heroic stature. They had simply fought and fought and fought until, exhausted in both mind and body, the personification of the Holy Kingdom's justice expired on the cold, stone steps of the palace. She had even managed to interpose her corpse between Eduardo and the doors in doing so. No pride filled Eduardo's heart in the wake of his accomplishment, only a disturbing sense of unease. All she had to do was step aside while they removed the insane man acting as the Holy King.
She could have returned to her post as Grand Master of the Holy Order and served long and honorably under a proper government that would see Roble vaulted into unprecedented heights of prosperity. Yet, she had clung to her convictions to the bitter end. This left Eduardo with a single, haunting question: why? Lord Eduardo, a company captain emerged from the palace doors. Lord Bells is calling for you. It's about damn time, Eduardo said. I take it we finally have Caspond and Duke de Bonai? In a manner of speaking, the captain replied. There were complications. Eduardo gestured for the officer to lead the way. He offered the last of the custodios a salute for her resolve before giving the fallen paladin a wide berth as he made his way up the stairs and into the royal palace. The captain brought him straight to the royal apartments, where a line of armsmen was barring the corridor. Enrique Bells stood a few meters beyond them, arms crossed over his barrel chest. His troubled eyes went to Eduardo as he squeezed his way through the cordon. Custodio? Eduardo shook his head. I tried. She wouldn't see reason, no matter how I presented our case. Damn it. She was always too stubborn for her own good. As annoying as she could be, the last thing we needed to do was uproot the good with the bad. I don't disagree, Eduardo said, but what's done is done. I heard something about complications. The commander of the Royal Marines turned with a jerk of his head. This way. They made their way deeper into the royal apartments and stopped at the main dining room. Just inside the double doors, Duke de Bonai lay face first on the carpet. A long trail of dark stains led from his body to the dining room table, where Caspond lay staring lifelessly at the ceiling on the floor. Eduardo knelt with a frown, staring at the golden fork buried in the man's chest. We found them like this, Lord Bell said. I would hope so, Eduardo snorted. I know of no armsmen or soldiers proficient in utensils. How long ago did this happen? It can't have been long before we arrived. The bodies were still warm when we got here. Is this going to be a problem? Is it? Caspond didn't matter, but Duke de Bonai was a concern. While the Duke's passing meant that the progressive camp had lost its greatest opponent, the conservatives would be sure to voice their suspicions about his death. Who discovered this, exactly? Eduardo asked. The Royal Marines and the Royal Guard, Lord Bells answered. It was a race, though. People from all sides came and saw this within a few minutes of us. Good, Eduardo nodded. Then we have plenty of witnesses to confirm we didn't do anything. Has word begun to spread? Not yet. Everyone knows how delicate this operation was. Then inform the houses encamped around Hobans first. Our work is done here, managing the outcomes is theirs. Eduardo rose to his feet, looking down at the man who briefly reigned as the Holy King. A strange thought occurred to him. Lord Bells. Do you feel anything looking at Caspond? Nothing at all. Strange, now that you mention it. Even Kalka's staunchest opponents in the court keenly felt the Holy Queen's loss. Many of the Holy Kingdom's citizens still did. Caspond, on the other hand, this man, Eduardo said. He was no true king. Looks like the coast is clear. When the column of armsmen marched into the city, Naya went into hiding, thinking that they had been sent after her. The column went right through without stopping, however, and she had later learned that it was only one of many coming into the city on some errand elsewhere. Say asked around about them, but no one seemed to know what they were up to. As far as Naya could tell, Hobans remained unchanged from its presently miserable state, and the only thing that might be considered a disturbance by the nobles was her. The whole incident, or, rather, her actions in response to it, made her burn with shame. Not long before, she was struggling against an unlawful arrest, claiming loudly that she had done nothing wrong. Then, when the column appeared, she went and hid as if she was guilty of something. Was her conviction so weak? Was she ashamed of the path of justice? What sort of example was she setting for the thousands of people who had come to hear her speak? Slowly, but surely, anger replaced shame. There was anger at the nobles who thought they could do whatever they wished, but, more importantly, she was angry at herself. Millions of people were hungry for the Sorcerer King's wisdom, yet she had allowed herself to become wrapped up in selfish, petty concerns. Naya's hand came up to adjust her new mirror shades. They were, of course, a pale imitation of what the Sorcerer King had lent to her during the war, but they were still better than anything she had since then. Are you sure you can see properly in those? Say asked. They are fine, Naya answered. I don't have to move around much when I'm speaking, anyway. In truth, they made it difficult to see in poor lighting. The glass of the mirror shades had been hastily made from finery slag, so it was only a bit better than looking through a wine bottle. That wasn't a very pressing concern, however, and a better version could be commissioned in time. Are you going to speak? I don't see why I shouldn't, Naya replied. It looks like we have a good opportunity to do stuff with the nobles busy elsewhere. The columns had left quite a bit of excitement in their wake, and the citizens of Hobans were out and about, alert for new developments while gossiping amongst themselves. The volunteers from the Corps had fixed up the platform in the square, so the stage seemed set to address the people. When she mounted the platform, few were looking in her direction. However, it didn't take long for her voice to capture the attention of everyone in the plaza. You have witnessed it for yourselves, she told them. Felt it keenly in your bones. And, as you have seen, even I am not immune. It is the terrible, terrible consequence of being raised in a society that embraces the sin that is weakness. We are expected to accept our lot in life. We shy away at the tread of booted feet. We lower our heads at the authority of men who just happen to have been born into positions of privilege. You must ask yourselves, my friends, is this just? Is it just to have the fruit of your labor arbitrarily stolen away? Is it just to have your labor denied to you entirely? To helplessly watch your families starve and waste away at the cold stroke of a pen? To be robbed of the right to take control of your lives because those in power threaten your lives with what they assert is their right to enact violence? No. No, it's not right. Someone cried. Hobans is dying because of those damn nobles. What makes them so damn special? Who gave them the right to decide what we're worth? Who gave them the power of life and death over us? Angry shouts rose from the crowd, echoing off of the nearby buildings. The sentiment rapidly spread, and Naya raised her hand to call for silence. This is why weakness is a sin, Naya told them. It is a seed sown deep within us, and we are oblivious to its choking tendrils spreading throughout our beings. It is only when injustice comes to reap its harvest of suffering and sorrow that we realize how powerless we truly are. Weakness is why we are forced to endure this cycle of injustice. But what can we do? Someone asked. We are all weak, sinners. Just because you are, Naya said, doesn't mean you must be. Cast aside your sin and work hard to cultivate strength. For it is only through strength that we can achieve true justice. As she continued to speak and answer questions from the crowd, more and more people appeared from the surrounding neighborhoods to listen. With them, however, also came the armsmen from the local street patrols. As before, they didn't immediately act upon seeing what was happening, instead watching from the fringes of the plaza in their eerie way. You were so creepy. But it would be nice if they joined us too. Naya knew that the chances of that were slim to none. When she spoke along the northern coast, the conservative forces sent to police the liberated towns only regarded her as a curiosity when she addressed the public. The royalists, as proven by earlier events, were just looking for excuses to act against her and her followers, but they had no right to do so unless they broke the law, for they were bound to the same thing that gave them power. Thus, she paid them no mind, choosing to focus on the people who actually needed her help. After about an hour of speaking, Naya stepped off of the platform for a short break. A volunteer brought her a flask of cool water, and she nodded in thanks before soothing her overworked throat. There are a lot of armsmen out there, Say said as she emerged from the shadows. I saw, Naya replied. But they haven't done anything. That might be because more and more people keep showing up, the bard told her. There must be 5,000 citizens in the plaza right now. They'll probably tell everyone to go to bed once it gets late enough, Naya said. I doubt they'll try anything funny so soon after Lord What's-His-Face failed to drag me off. Or they might try something different, Say said. Naya set down her half-emptied flask on the platform stairs. What do you mean? A lot of different houses are present, Say told her. They didn't just bring street patrols either. There are rogues all over the place. Her eyes went involuntarily to the nearby rooftops. Rogues? Naya said in a low voice. Does that mean the smiling demon is here, too? I saw House Rastello's armsmen in the mix, so probably. Had they come to assassinate her? The possibility was high. House Rastello hired an assassin precisely because they assassinated people. She was done fearing for her own life, however. If one looked at things from another angle, They were presenting an opportunity for her to get revenge for Mr. Louser. The smiling demon didn't seem to notice her when she was tailing him the other day, so she thought her chances of sniping him were pretty good. There wouldn't be any jealous women to interfere with her this time either, probably. "Where are House Rastello's men gathered?" Naya asked. "In the corner of the plaza west of us." "Why?" "That was close. Only 50 meters away." "This might be our chance to get rid of that assassin." Naya fished her bow and quiver out from under the platform steps. "We can't allow him to carry out any more of his evil deeds." Naya rushed off along the edge of the plaza, scanning the rooftops as she made her way west. Halfway to the corner, Say pointed to the eaves overhanging a nearby shop. "There he is." Naya wasn't the only one who heard the bard's fearful cry. Hundreds of heads turned upwards and shouts of panic rose from nearby. "It's him! The smiling demon! The nobles sent a killer! May the gods preserve us!" The panic served as a perfect distraction. Her hateful nemesis and his evil allies scanned the hysterical crowd, oblivious to the threat that Naya represented. She knocked a broadhead arrow and drew its fletchings to her cheek, focusing on her target. Cheers of jubilation rose as the man staggered, clutching the arrow buried in his gut. No matter how good his equipment might have been, her ability to imbue arrows made them fly unerringly to their target. "You got him," Say said. "No, wait, he's still moving. Get him again." Naya unleashed another broadhead. This time, however, it seemed to vanish just as it reached its mark. Her mouth fell open in horror as an inky blot expanded from the point of impact, manifesting into an unmistakably fiendish form. The crowd collectively gasped at the sight. Demon. Oh, gods, he literally was a demon. A jagged gash of yellow light split open the demon's head. Shrieks of terror filled the square as it showered the people with profane laughter that seemed to scrape against the inside of their skulls. "A shadow demon," Naya breathed. Say stared up at her in shock. "You know what that is?" "I do," Naya nodded grimly at the memory. "I had to fight them once during the war. They're demonic servants of Yeldabaoth. More specifically, the Xian warriors accompanying Naya and Shizu on their daring rescue of the Xian prince had fought them." Say's surprise was perfectly understandable. They were beings that the bard could never have dreamed of before that moment. "Oh. Isn't that bad? It means House Rastello serves Yeldabaoth." "It must be true," Naya nodded. "They've been in league with the Demon Emperor all along." The shadow demon spread its wings in an intimidating display before vanishing into the night. With the fearful creature no longer present, the crowd turned their ire on the House Rastello patrols on the street. "What the hell, Rastello? Explain yourselves." The crowd pressed in on the armsmen, engulfing them within seconds and spilling over into the nearby streets. Nearby, the patrols from the other houses didn't lift a finger to help them, instead withdrawing from the increasingly ugly scene. As elated as Naya was over their small victory, she knew that the anger of the crowd had to be harnessed or it would simply run its course to little lasting effect. She rushed back to her platform, her boots pounding against its wooden steps. "Baraha." Naya froze just as she opened her mouth to speak. She turned to find Lord Lugo a short distance away from the platform, his escort struggling against the crowd surging against them. "Wait!" Naya shouted, "Let him speak." The crowd's anger was still tangible, but they gave Lord Lugo and his men their space. Naya walked over to the edge of the platform closest to the Scion, frowning as she took in his appearance. For some reason, both he and his men were fully armored. "What in the world is going on here?" Lord Lugo said. "Why have you driven the people into this frenzy?" "It wasn't I that did this," Naya replied. "The people have simply had enough of the abuse and exploitation that they've suffered at the hands of the royalists." "There are no more royalists." Lord Lugo's statement set Naya back 2 paces. "No more royalists? What do you mean?" "Caspond has been overthrown," Lord Lugo told her. "A new government is forming under Princess Carlotta." "Why should that mean anything to us?" This time, it was Lord Lugo's turn to be taken aback. He gazed up at her from the cobblestones, confusion written all over his face. "I can't say that this is exactly what we plan to do, but it's a decisive step in the right direction. Justice can once again take its rightful place in the Holy Kingdom." The angry tone of the crowd diminished by 2 degrees. Naya gazed out at the sea of gaunt faces awaiting her response. "Will we truly have justice?" Naya asked.
Of course, we... Are you sure about that? Will House Rastello be brought to justice for the assassination of Iago Lauser and so many others? Will the former royalist houses be made to pay for all of the suffering that their administration of the North has wrought? I told you before, Miss Baraha, there is an order to things. Perhaps to you, there is, Naya said. But that order is an order where the victims of this great tragedy will never have their turn. You know as well as I exactly how this will play out. Even nobles are not above justice, Lord Lugo told her. I know you believe that, Lord Lugo. But the truth is that the people of the Holy Kingdom will never be able to bring their accusations to court. Even if they could, the nobles who stand accused are the very same nobles charged with upholding the law. The way things are, no justice can be had for the common people, and the evil men responsible for all of the injustices in the North will simply sail away, safe and sound to their warm manors in the South. That's right. A voice rose from the crowd. Those bastards can't be allowed to get away. Justice for the North. Justice for the North. Justice for the North. The people picked up the rallying cry, just as they had in so many other places. Lord Lugo stepped closer, raising his voice in order to be heard. Please, Miss Baraha. Don't do this. Give us a chance. Give the Holy Kingdom a chance. I am giving the Holy Kingdom a chance, Lord Lugo, Naya replied. A chance to finally shed its weakness. A chance to achieve true justice. The old ways must never be allowed to take hold of this land again, lest we all succumb to sin once more. Lord Lugo's shoulders drooped as renewed cheers of support for Naya's declaration crashed over them like a wave. The young nobleman looked down at the pavement, clenching and unclenching his fists. If that's what you want, he told her, I will not stand in your way. But you cannot do this here. The armies that stormed the royal palace will eventually disperse, and the former royalists will direct their forces to put down this uprising. You must take your people and leave before that happens. With that, Lord Lugo turned away and disappeared into a nearby alley with his men. A cheer rippled through the crowd as if some great victory had just been won. Naya, however, wrestled with a bundle of bitter feelings over their sudden parting. He's a good guy. It would have been better if he had joined us. In all likelihood, however, it wouldn't have happened. Lugo was an honorable man. He wouldn't forsake his house so easily. We should probably leave like he says, Say said from behind the stage. But there are still so many people in the city that we have to save, Naya replied. Those left behind would probably suffer the same fate as the people under House Rastello in the West Quarter. She couldn't stomach such an atrocity. Additionally, as emaciated as they were, the people wouldn't survive the journey to Lloyd's without ample preparation. Then I hope the nobles have had enough fighting for one night, Say said. What could they do? They once relied on the law or the conservatives to shield them, but the realities of the new government meant that Naya and her followers were now alone. It wasn't just in Hobans, either. Los Ganaderos and the Sorcerer King Rescue Corps would lose their source of supplies, and their new holdings in the north would become contested. I think we have to try and make a run for it anyway, Naya said. We need to warn the others about what has happened. I have to stay and lead the people. Could you run ahead and contact our allies? Try to arrange for some supplies to be delivered. An armed escort would be nice, too. I can try, Say replied. But it looks like it's too late for the people here. At the far corner of the plaza, the glow of torches cast long shadows that advanced up Wind Street. Within minutes, uniform footfalls echoed off of the side streets, too. Her people remained undaunted, however, and shifted to face the incoming threat. They were clearly still angry enough to fight, but Naya urged them to temper their rage. Do you have some way to strengthen your followers? Say asked. Those guys don't look very friendly. Indeed, they didn't. Like Lord Lugo and his escort, they were armored from head to toe and brandishing battlefield weapons. Once the armsmen plugged every way out of the plaza, an unfamiliar voice boomed across the square. Faceless one, show yourself. Naya hopped off of the stage, her mind racing to figure a way out for her people. The voice sounded again, this time more demanding and aggressive. Faceless one, you are charged with conspiracy against the Holy Queen, Carlotta, and the Holy Kingdom. Come forward and answer for your transgressions. Queen Carlotta probably doesn't even know she's the Holy Queen, yet. If Naya recalled correctly, Carlotta was 2 or 3 years old. Who would conspire against a 2-year-old?
Saying so was meaningless, however. The nobles were in full authority mode and fully expected to get what they wanted. "I ain't heard of no Holy Queen Carlotta before," someone said. "Yeah. The temple said nothing about that." "What happened to the Holy King? What did you go and do to him?" Caspond was unsuited for the office. He was replaced. "Oh, that was probably a mistake. But the Holy King's the chosen of the gods." "Yeah. The gods don't change their minds every other day." "Why are you telling us this? Shouldn't it be a priest?" "Bring us a priest." Countless questions and demands pelted the almsmen, regardless of whether they were the original speaker or not. The almsmen became flustered by the awkward situation, but the lordling leading them would have none of it. "Enough. This is your last chance to show yourself, faceless one. Don't force us to flush you out of hiding." Naya bit her lip in frustration. They were in no shape to fight retinues girded for battle, and there would be countless injuries if they forced their way into the packed plaza to search for her. The nobleman raised his arm. "All right, sort these." "Wait." Naya cried. "Wait. I'm trying to come out." She squeezed her way through the crowd as quickly as possible, popping out in front of a line of surprised almsmen a dozen meters from the scion leading them. The nobleman, who was entirely unfamiliar to Naya, gave her a strange look. "I suppose that's why they call you the Faceless One." "Take me if you must," Naya said, "but let my people go." "You are in no position to make demands, criminal. Everyone will get their measure of justice here. The Holy Kingdom suffers no traitors to the crown," says the people who just betrayed Caspond. Purple-faced, the nobleman stormed forward and raised a gauntleted fist. Naya shied away, raising her hands to cover her head. "No." Something like a squeak sounded in the air. After a moment, Naya looked up to see why the man's blow hadn't landed. Say lay unmoving on the cobblestones in front of her, bleeding from a gash across her right temple. Say. She took 2 steps toward the fallen bard before she was clubbed by the same fist. Cries of outrage exploded as the world spun around her. "What are you doing, you bastard? Striking women. Have you no shame?" Naya raised a hand to call for silence as she found her footing again. She didn't care about what she said anymore. "It's too bad you Southerners bought your way out of service instead of taking all of this bravery of yours to the wall." What did she say? That man bought his way out of service? No, she said the Southerners did. "That's enough out of you," the nobleman roared. He raised his fist again, but, before he could take another swing at Naya, a man from the crowd threw himself at the lordling bodily, sending them both tumbling to the street. All at once, the barely restrained anger of the crowd exploded. A chaotic melee spread across the plaza, filling the night air with the bitter rage of a city long oppressed. Still, it was nowhere near enough. Once the armsmen got over their initial shock at the sudden assault, their sergeants started barking out orders and their formations solidified again. Soon, only the blood of the residents was painting the streets. This is a disaster. No matter how they twisted and turned, the nobles were always ahead. Even though the citizens had served in the army and fought in the war, they had been purposely weakened by the nobles' schemes. At the same time, the nobles kept fighting men ready to enforce their will, donning a facade of righteousness defined by laws of their own making. Her followers needed time to grow strong just as the ones in Rimian had, but there was no chance of that now. As Say said, she needed a way to strengthen her followers while they were still weak. She needed a way to protect them or maybe even strike down their tormentors. The only thing Naya had, however, was the righteous fury burning deep within her over the brazen injustices being committed all around her. Naya flinched at a wail of agony next to her, squeezing her eyes shut at the sound filling her ears. Then, she opened them a crack at the sudden silence ensuing in its wake. The sight that greeted her made her jump up with a panicked shout. Her hand was on fire. No, she was on fire. Silver flames danced over her body, yet her flesh wasn't being consumed. She gazed at the sight in silent wonder for a moment before noticing the charred corpse of the belligerent nobleman lying contorted on the cobblestones a step away. Did I do that? The dull ache in her cheek was joined by a second, pulsing pain in her shoulder. Everyone was staring at her in shock. Naya absently stepped over the dead nobleman, heading straight toward the nearest armsman. The armsman's eyes widened as she approached. "Why you? Stay away. Get away from me, witch." With a panicked cry, He drove his sword into Naya's thigh. The flames covering her body raced up the blade, engulfing the armsman in a flash of silver light. His panicked cry transformed into an agonized shriek as he dropped his weapon and danced around, trying in vain to extinguish the fire. Within seconds, his charred corpse fell to the street, joining the remains of his evil master. Fight! Naya gritted her teeth against pain in her leg. Fight! Power coursed through her voice, sweeping through the square to touch the thousands of followers behind her. Fight! Naya cried, citizens of the North, rise and fight. Fight for your families, fight for your homes. Fight for our future. With a deafening roar, a wave of citizens clad in righteous fire swept over the city streets. The armsmen who met the charge with brandished steel were cooked in their armor the moment their weapons touched the silver flames. Their swords and spears still injured Naya's followers, but every cut and stab was answered with the same fiery retribution. Helpless before the onslaught of justice, the establishment's forces cast down their arms and fled, but no respite would be offered to the agents of sin. Purge our lands of injustice. Naya's voice rang over the city, drive these demons into the sea. And, so, the flame of revolution was ignited in the Holy Kingdom.